In this lesson, we'll create a pastel drawing of a boat on the water in about an hour. Hello there everyone, Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and in this lesson we're going to take a look at creating a pastel sketch of a boat on the water. We'll use Rembrandt pastels and we'll use them in a looser manner as we complete this drawing in about an hour. We'll first take a look at the materials and then we'll dive into the process. So let's go ahead and dive in. In this lesson, we'll be working with Rembrandt pastels and we'll be working on PastelMat paper, which is a wonderful surface that features a deceptively deep tooth, which will allow us to put lots of layers on the surface. For this drawing, we want to create somewhat of an atmospheric feeling to the drawing. So we're going to be spending quite a bit of time on the sky and developing the sky first, and then move to the trees on the right, and then finally we'll address the boat on the water. We'll start with an application of yellow, and this yellow is very close to a primary yellow, and then we'll add a bit of a lighter orange. Then over the top, we'll go back to our primary yellow and work that material in, creating somewhat of a gradation. We'll also bring a little bit of that yellow down into the water. Now, we're going to create lots of layers here in the sky, and with pastel applications, some mixing will occur with each color that we add. Now we're going to go to an even lighter yellow. This is somewhat of a cooler yellow. This is closer to a lemon yellow, and we're going to add that close to where the sun is located within the picture plane. But we're also going to bring this color straight across and allow it to mix with the orange and primary yellow that we've already applied. You'll notice that I'm using the side of the stick to apply the pastel, and we're thinking in terms of a painter. So instead of thinking in terms of lines, we're thinking in terms of shapes of color and value. Now that we've got some base applications for our sky, we're going to go ahead and indicate the distant tree line and the trees on the right side of the picture plane. We'll do so with a raw umber. This is a pretty dark value here. It's close to brown, but it's definitely more neutral than a typical brown. Again, we're concentrating only on shapes, so we're just placing down some information about the shapes here relatively loosely and quickly. Now we're going to go back over the top of our umber applications with the primary yellow. This will mix with the colors underneath and create more of a smoky atmospheric effect, and it's also going to warm up those umber applications. We can also use our finger to do some blending and some smudging. Just make sure that your finger is nice and clean. I like to keep a wet paper towel on hand to keep my fingers nice and clean for those situations where I need to do some blending with my finger. Now it's back to the lemon yellow, and we're going to bring that right over the top of the edge of the shape of trees that we've created on the right side of the picture plane. It's important not to hurry this process. Even though this drawing is only an exercise for about an hour, we still want to take our time and be deliberate with our applications. Now a bit more orange here, and you can see how the mixing is starting to happen on the right side of the picture plane. And then again back with a finger with a quick smudge. Now I'm heightening up my colors a little bit, so I'm making the colors a little bit stronger in my drawing compared to what I see in the reference. This will hopefully make our drawing a little bit more interesting than the reference photo. Again, with the primary yellow here, we're just carving out some of the edges, and then again with the lemon yellow, doing the same thing here on the distant tree line. Now we're going to switch over to a slightly stronger orange. This is an orange that's a little bit darker in value and a little bit more intense in color compared to the first orange that we used. We'll continue to use that lemon yellow here to make a few adjustments and add some more variety to the color in the sky. At this point, I'm getting an idea of where the light is going to be filtering through the trees that we'll add in just a moment. Again, with a quick smudge here, just creating smoother transitions between the different colors and values. And now we're going to switch over to a very, very light yellow. This may appear as white, but it's actually a very light yellow. We're going to start by adding this color where the sun is located and then pull it across the middle of the picture plane. And then again, checking to make sure that my fingers are clean, I'll give this a quick smudge. And you can see how well the finger does at creating some smooth gradations of tone and value. Now we need to indicate the sun, so we're going to go back with that very light yellow and create a small circle there. And again, do some more blending and smudging there. We'll come back to that sun a little bit later, but for now we'll continue with the primary yellow closer to the horizon line. Now, it's important that you work on a paper that has enough tooth to accept multiple layered applications, as we're doing here. This paper, as I mentioned before, has a deceptive tooth associated with it, or a deceptive texture. It looks fairly smooth, but there is quite a bit of texture on the surface, which will allow us to continue to add colors. Now I'm going to grab a white. This is an actual white, and I'm going to draw a small circle for the sun. This will create enough contrast so that the sun stands out, but it's not too distracting from the rest of the sky. Now we're going to go back to our umber, and we're going to reestablish the tree line here. And since the tree line is closer to the viewer, we're going to see more contrast in this area, but we still want to keep that smoky look. We want to create basically an impression of the trees over here instead of defining everything with details. Now I've switched over to a color that's close to terracotta. This will create a little bit more variety. We can see that there are some trees with some leaves that are changing color over here. And then back to the raw umber before switching back to a yellow, and we'll just smooth those transitions between the sky and the edges of the trees here. And as we apply these colors, we can blend and smudge with our finger in between applications. Again, I'll remind you that we don't really need to think about details. We only want to think about the colors that we see, the values that we see, and the shapes of those colors and values. Now, with a darker yellow-green, we'll establish some of the highlights. These are very faint highlights that exist primarily on the left side of the trees. Next, we're going to add just a touch of a darker blue-green, and we're going to use this color quite a bit here in the lower part of the picture plane. But for now, we're just establishing some of those cooler shadows that exist on the bottom portion of the trees on the right side of the picture plane. We'll go ahead and use this color to establish the initial shape for the shadow that's cast on the water. And then we'll put a little bit more of it in the trees themselves, mainly in the shadowed locations. Now, green, of course, is made by mixing blue and yellow. So in the shadowed areas, we're going to add a little bit of blue. This will bring in a little bit more interest with the color. And then over the top of that, we can add a little bit more of the umber, darkening it while still being able to clearly see some of those blues. We'll use a bit of yellow here to define the bottom edge of the tree line where it meets the water. And then it's back to working on the edges of the trees and then darkening the values in the shadowed areas. This is a very, very dark brown here that I'm using to make the shadows a little bit darker and a little bit stronger. You'll notice that primarily my strokes are vertical, and also when I smudge these applications, I'm also pulling my finger down vertically. This will add to the atmospheric look of the painting, and it will also make it feel a little bit more impressionistic and loose. We'll bring this darker value down into the shadow of the water as well. Then we'll add just a slightly lighter yellow-green to create a few more highlights and a little bit more definition in these trees. Now we'll go ahead and put some colors down in the water. We're going to start here with a very, very light yellow. This is the same color that we used in the center of the sky. And of course, the sky is reflected in the water. So we're going to be using generally the same colors that we see in the sky with an exception of a couple of blues. Now, we'll get back to this demonstration in a moment, but I want to tell you about a live lesson series that we have over at thevirtualinstructor.com, where we create an entire pastel drawing from start to finish. Now, of course, this isn't a quick sketch. This lesson series contains 7 lessons, which are presented in real time. So you can create your own drawing alongside of me if you wish. You'll learn how to layer colors after creating a base application or an underpainting of shadows, and develop a pastel drawing completely with a very detailed layered approach. Now, this live lesson series is part of the membership program, but I'll leave a link to this specific live lesson series if you want to check it out in the description below. Now back to the lesson. You'll notice that the strokes I'm using are mainly horizontal. This will add some contrast between the sky and the water. So contrast, when we think of contrast, we typically think of contrast in value, but contrast can be any difference. And this difference can come in the form of directional stroke making. So even though our colors are very similar to what we see in the sky and the water, we can differentiate the sky from the water with our stroke making. Now, a few more highlights are added to the trees on the right using an even lighter green. And we're going to use this sparingly here because most of the values are pretty dark. Then it's back to our dark blue-green here, and we'll do some more defining of the cast shadow on the water. And I'm going to bring in just a little bit of blue here to further differentiate the sky from the water. This is a very, very light blue. And then we'll give this a quick blend here, again using horizontal stroking. We'll refine the edge where the highlighted part of the water meets the shadowed part of the water. And then we'll use our very light yellow here, again, right above the location where we see the sun. And then it's back to our more primary yellow here. Now we're getting some good variety in color in the water, but there are some oranges that should be in our water, so a little bit of orange is used here. And I'm going to bring in a little bit more blue in the shadow. You can see here that this blue is a little bit more like a phthalo blue. It leans a little bit more towards green. And then we'll make some of the cast shadow and shadow underneath the trees a little bit stronger with our very dark brown. Now I'm going to add a little bit more of a stronger red up here. Again, just for some more variety in the color. And then we can frame out the edges again with our yellow. Now, right along the edge of the shadow, there is a little bit of a stronger blue, so we'll use our blue that's more like a phthalo blue here in that transition zone. And then a little bit more of that lemon yellow in the reflections of the water. Hopefully you can see why patience is important when working with pastels. Oftentimes, you're going to need to add multiple layers to build up the color that you need and the effects that you need. Most of the time when people are new to pastels, they only think a few layers will work, but really you need to be able to apply lots of layers to the surface in order to build up some depth and color. Now we'll continue to refine the edges of the trees just a bit and add a few open areas where some of the light is getting through. And you'll notice that the shape that I've created for my trees is a little bit different than what we see in the reference, and that's perfectly acceptable. You don't have to create a replica of your reference. In fact, it should be a little bit different, your finished painting or drawing. Now, we do see some branches that are extending up, so I'm going to start here with a brown. And I'm using the edge of the pastel to create these lines. Now, if you're not comfortable with this, you can always use a pastel pencil to do the same thing. But for this drawing, I am using only the big fat pastels, so I'm only going to use the edge here to create the impression of these branches. With trees, there are going to be more branches closer to the edge or smaller branches closer to the edge, the outer edges of the tree. And of course, these lines are going to be a little bit thicker closer to the trunk. You can see I can also roll the edge to create some very light marks. And then we're going to give this a very light smudge to keep the atmospheric look that we're after. Now for a little bit of variety, I'll switch over to a darker brown and apply this mostly close to the area of the trunk. And then again, a very soft blend. And we'll add a bit more yellow in between some of the branches. And also some touches of orange as well. We'll make our sky a little bit more interesting by pulling a bit more of the orange over to the center of the picture plane and also applying it in the reflection in the water. Now our scene is starting to come together, but it's time to add the boat, which of course is the main focal point. We'll start with a very dark umber here, and I'm going to just frame out the contours of the boat. Again, if you feel more comfortable using a pastel pencil for this, you're more than welcome to do so. Now, this boat features dark blues and dark reds, so after I've framed out the basic shape, I'll go back into the shadowed areas and add a bit of blue. And then we'll darken that up with our umber. Now we'll use our very, very light yellow here to start establishing some of the white shapes of the boat. Now, the reason I'm not using a pastel pencil here for this is because I want to preserve this looser, impressionistic feeling in this particular image. Now a little bit of gray for the cast shadow on the surface of the water. And now we'll switch over to a bit of red to start adding some of the red elements on the boat. This includes the little stripe that goes along the side. And then we can clean up that line here with a bit more of the very light yellow. We can also use this to lighten up some of the colors that we have in place, like the reds and the blues. And then further define the overall form of the boat. We can add shadows with the dark umber. And then continue to adjust these colors and values as much as we wish. Now, after a bit of dark brown, we'll go back with a darker blue. And after addressing the front of the hull of the boat, we'll add the blue flag. And then we'll continue to refine the overall shape of the boat before taking that dark red or terracotta color to create the mast. And this line is a little bit too thick and a little bit too strong, so I'm going to soften it with a bit of the yellow. Then using the dark brown, we'll gently touch the surface and roll the pastel using the end of the pastel to create the ropes. Again, you may find it easier to use pastel pencils, and that's perfectly acceptable. Now we need to add a little bit of warmth to the boat here, so a little bit of yellow is added. This will make it make more sense with the overall light within the scene. And even if you get some contamination, you can go right over the top of your applications with another color to cover it completely. Clearly, one of the benefits to using pastels is that we can create opaque applications that cover up applications we've previously made on the surface. Now, using our dark brown, we'll add a few more details like the windows on the side of the boat. And then it's back to our darker red, refining the stripe along the side. A few more highlights are added here with a very light yellow. And then it's time to make the cast shadow in the water. We'll use a warm gray for this initially. We'll give it a quick smudge. And we're not quite finished with the boat, but for now I see that I need to add a few more highlights here on the right side on the trees. So a very light yellow-green is added. And again, I'm just pulling out a little bit more information on the trees than what we were provided with in the reference. A bit more blue here just to bump up the color. Now it's back to the boat. Here, a very dark brown is used to refine some of the details. A bit more warmth is added with a little bit of yellow, and a few more details here with the terracotta. Now we need to make the cast shadow underneath the boat a little bit stronger, so we'll use our dark brown here. And now it's time to remove the tape and see our clean edges. And our quick 1 hour long pastel sketch of a boat on the water is complete. Thanks so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you were able to pick up a couple of things here and there. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like, leave a comment below. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you want to take your drawing and painting skills to another level, then you should check out the membership program over at thevirtualinstructor.com. We have a ton of courses on drawing, painting, covering generally every media and subject matter you can imagine. We also do weekly live lessons, which are all recorded and stored in our vault. And we do weekly critiques as part of the Members Minute. And there's also a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers that includes everything you need to teach. Now, if you want to learn more about our program, there's a link in the description below. You can check it out for free for a week. Everyone starts with a week-long trial, which gives you access to everything. Everything's included in the trial. Now, if you want to just check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free as well, you can do that. I'll leave a link in the description below. That will put you on our mailing list, and you'll get a ton of free art videos as well. Thanks again for watching, and as always, I wish you all the very best in your artistic success.